I still remember the expressions on their faces. 25 perfectly coiffed Bostonians standing in my son's dining room, their mouths slightly agape, champagne flutes empty in their hands. The long mahogany table gleamed under the chandelier light. Not a single plate or utensil in sight. No savory aromas wafted from the kitchen. No bustling servers prepared to unveil a Christmas feast. Just silence and confusion. And there, at the head of the table, stood my daughter-in-law Chloe, her face slowly turning the same shade as her crimson designer dress. "Where's the food?" someone finally asked, the question hanging in the air like an accusation. Chloe's perfectly manicured hand fluttered to her throat. There must be some mistake. My mother-in-law was supposed to— Wasn't Helen in charge of the cooking? Another voice murmured, just loud enough for everyone to hear. But I, Helen Montgomery, was nowhere to be found in that elegant Beacon Hill townhouse. While Chloe stammered through explanations, I was 1,500 miles away, feeling the gentle sway of a luxury cruise ship departing from Fort Lauderdale. The Florida sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks as I stood. On the deck, a real glass of champagne in my hand, not the empty promise of one. My phone buzzed incessantly in my purse. I could almost see the panic unfolding back in Boston. For a moment, a twinge of guilt pricked at my conscience. My son Ryan would be caught in the middle of this disaster. My granddaughter Olivia would be confused. But then I remembered Chloe's words from just days before. "You're not busy anyway. What else do you have to do with your life?" 5 years. That's how long I'd been the unpaid chef, housekeeper, and nanny in my son's household. 5 years of, "Helen, could you just—" and "Mom, we need you to." 5 years of swallowing my pride while Chloe introduced me to her friends as our helper, rather than Ryan's mother or Olivia's grandmother. The ship's horn sounded, a deep, resonant blast that seemed to echo my own Declaration of Independence. A crew member approached, his uniform crisp and professional. "Ms. Montgomery, Rachel Porter has been expecting you. She's asked me to escort you to the captain's welcome reception." I smiled and took a final glance at my phone before turning it off completely. 52 missed calls and counting. "I'd be delighted," I replied, slipping the phone into my purse. I've been looking forward to this for a very long time. As we walked across the deck, my thoughts drifted back to the letter I'd left on the kitchen counter in Boston. Just 3 sentences. "Respect is earned, not demanded. I've earned a vacation. Merry Christmas." The truth was, I hadn't made this decision lightly or impulsively. The E-Key cruise ticket had been purchased months ago, a gift to myself after years of putting everyone else first. I'd planned to tell them about my holiday plans, of course, until Chloe informed me, not asked me, that I would be cooking Christmas dinner for her 24 closest friends. "They've heard so much about your cooking," she'd said with that saccharine smile that never reached her eyes. "Just make sure it's impressive, Helen. I don't want to be embarrassed." At the captain's reception, the maitre d' guided me to a private table where a tall, elegant woman with silver-streaked dark hair stood to greet me. "Helen Montgomery," she said warmly, embracing me. "After all these years of emails and phone calls, I finally get to thank you in person. Rachel Porter, CEO of Oceanic Luxury. Cruises had been my invisible employer for the past 3 years. While Chloe thought I spent my days idly waiting for their next command, I'd been quietly consulting on menu design and dining experiences for one of the most prestigious cruise lines in the world, all from my laptop in the guest bedroom they'd generously allowed me to occupy. The Michelin Committee was impressed with the Northern Lights restaurant concept," Rachel continued, pouring me another glass of champagne. "Your insight about incorporating storytelling into the dining experience was brilliant." I felt a flush of pride warm my cheeks. Here, I wasn't just Helen or the help. I was valued for my expertise, my decades of experience in hospitality and culinary arts, before I'd set it all aside to help raise Olivia. My phone remained off, but I could imagine the scene unfolding back in Boston. The guests would be leaving by now, hungry and gossiping. Ryan would be torn between anger and confusion. And Chloe would be humiliated, the one thing she feared above all else. "You seem distracted," Rachel observed as waiters presented our first course, a delicate amuse-bouche that showcased the very techniques I'd recommended months ago. "I'm leaving behind a bit of a situation," I admitted, "but sometimes you need to create a little chaos to restore proper order." Rachel raised her glass. "To chaos, then, and to whatever comes after." As our glasses clinked, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, the lightness of setting down a burden I'd carried for too long. the weight of being taken for granted, the heaviness of invisible labor disguised as family duty. Back in Boston, my daughter-in-law was facing the consequences of her assumptions. But what she didn't realize yet was that this wasn't just about one ruined dinner party. This was about respect, and the lesson was just beginning. The descent into invisibility had been gradual, like water slowly eroding stone. It hadn't always been this way between Chloe and me. When Ryan first introduced us 7 years ago at a small bistro in Cambridge, she'd been charming, attentive, even warm. "Your son talks about you constantly," she'd said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "All those amazing family dinners you used to make, the way you built your catering business from nothing after your husband died." I'd been flattered by her interest, touched by the way she seemed to appreciate my history. Back then, I was still living in my small apartment in Somerville, running a modest but successful consulting business for restaurants and hotels. After 30 years in the hospitality industry, I'd built a reputation for transforming struggling establishments into distinctive dining experiences. Ryan had been so happy that day, his arm draped protectively around Chloe's shoulders, his eyes constantly seeking my approval. My handsome, thoughtful son, who'd weathered the loss of his father at 16, who'd worked his way through college and business school, who'd never given me a moment's worry. "Mom makes the best coq au vin you've ever tasted," he told Chloe, his voice warm with pride. "She used to cater for the governor's events." Chloe had looked impressed. "You'll have to make it for me sometime." That sometime came sooner than I expected. Just 2 weeks after their engagement, Chloe called to ask if I'd cater their engagement party. "We can't afford your usual rates," she'd explained, "but we'd be happy to pay for ingredients." It was the first red flag I chose to ignore. I told myself she was young, still establishing her career in public relations. I convinced myself it was an honor to contribute to their happiness. So I spent 3 days preparing a feast for 60 people, transforming their small apartment into a showplace of culinary delights. That night, as guests raved about the food, I overheard Chloe accepting compliments without a single mention of my contribution. When someone directly asked who had catered, she'd replied, "Oh, we have connections in the industry," with a conspiratorial wink. After their wedding, things accelerated. When Chloe became pregnant with Olivia, Ryan called me in a panic. "Mom, we're not ready for this. Chloe's career is taking off and the timing is all wrong. Could you possibly help us? Just until we get our feet under us?" How could I refuse my own son? I sublet my apartment, put most of my consulting work on hold, and moved into their guest bedroom. Temporary, we all agreed. A few months at most. Those months stretched into a year, then 2. Olivia was a colicky baby who needed constant attention. Chloe returned to work just 6 weeks after giving birth, leaving most of the childcare to me. Ryan worked long hours at his investment firm, grateful for my help, but increasingly absent. "I don't know what we'd do without you, Mom," he'd say, kissing the top of my head as he rushed out the door each morning. But there was never talk of when my temporary arrangement might end or how they planned to manage without me. By Olivia's 3rd birthday, I had become part of the household furniture, essential but unremarkable. My role had expanded beyond childcare to include cooking, cleaning, laundry, grocery shopping, and scheduling. I was effectively running their home while Chloe built her career and social standing. The transformation in how Chloe addressed me was subtle but unmistakable. The respectful Helen became a commanding Helen. Requests became expectations. Gratitude became entitlement. "Helen, Olivia needs to be picked up early today." "Helen, we're having guests for dinner tomorrow." "Helen, the bathroom needs cleaning before my mother visits." I remember the exact moment I realized my position in the family had fundamentally changed. It was at one of Chloe's dinner parties, about 2 years ago. I'd spent the day preparing an elaborate meal for 8 of her colleagues. As I served the main course, one guest complimented the presentation. "This is gorgeous," she exclaimed. "Did you have it catered?" Before I could speak, Chloe laughed lightly. "Oh, Helen doesn't mind cooking. She has no career to worry about anyway. We're lucky she's available." The room grew awkwardly quiet. I stood there, serving spoon in hand, as if I'd been slapped. Ryan glanced down at his plate, saying, "Nothing." Later that night, after the guests had gone, I approached my son as he loaded the dishwasher. "Ryan, did you notice how Chloe spoke about me tonight?" He sighed, not meeting my eyes. "Mom, she didn't mean anything by it. She was just making conversation. She made it sound like I'm the hired help, like I never had a life or career before this." He finally looked at me, his expression a mixture of guilt and frustration. You know how Chloe gets when she's entertaining. She's under a lot of pressure at work. Can we just let it go? For the sake of peace? Peace. It became the word that silenced me, the concept that kept me in line. For the sake of peace, I swallowed my objections. For the sake of peace, I accepted my diminished status. For Olivia's sake, I stayed. But as my public role shrank, I quietly began rebuilding my professional life in private. Late at night, after everyone was asleep, I would open my laptop and reconnect with old industry contacts. Small consulting projects at first, analyses I could complete without anyone noticing. Then Rachel Porter reached out about a remote position advising on her cruise line's culinary program. "We've heard you're the best," her email had said. "And we understand discretion is important in your current situation." For 3 years, I'd lived this double life. Undervalued family member by day, respected culinary consultant by night. The money I earned went into a separate account, my freedom fund, as I privately called it. The cruise ticket was the first significant withdrawal. As Thanksgiving approached this year, Chloe's treatment reached new lows. She'd taken to criticizing my cooking in front of guests, suggesting it was old-fashioned and unsophisticated. She'd begun rearranging the kitchen after I'd cleaned it, implying I hadn't done it properly. But it was my granddaughter who finally helped me see the situation clearly. 5-year-old Olivia, with her unfiltered honesty, looked up from her breakfast one morning and asked, "Grandma, why does Mommy talk to you like you're in trouble all the time?" Out of the mouths of babes. That question lingered in my mind as Christmas approached. As Chloe laid out her expectations for the holiday dinner, 7 courses for 25 guests, all to be prepared, served, and cleaned up by me, I realized something had to change, not just for my sake, but for Olivia's. What lesson was I teaching her by accepting this treatment? That it was a grandmother's duty to be a servant? That women should silently endure disrespect for the sake of peace? The cruise ticket had been sitting in my drawer for months. A fantasy, I'd thought. A someday dream. But as I watched Chloe check off demands on her Christmas dinner list, that someday suddenly became now. "You'll need to have everything ready by 7 p.m. sharp," Chloe instructed, not looking up from her phone. "And please wear something appropriate. My friend Vanessa from Vogue will be there, and I want everything to be perfect." I smiled and nodded, already mentally packing my suitcase. "Of course, dear," I said. "Everything will be exactly as it should be." And for once, I wasn't lying. The first morning on the cruise ship dawned with a brilliance I hadn't experienced in years. I woke to the gentle rocking of the ocean and the soft golden light filtering through my cabin's window. No alarm clock, no list of chores, no expectations beyond my own desires. I reached for my phone out of habit, then pulled my hand back. Not yet. Whatever chaos was unfolding in Boston could wait a few more hours. This moment was mine alone. After a leisurely shower, I dressed in a flowing turquoise sundress I'd purchased specifically for this trip, one that had hung in my closet with the tag still attached for months, waiting for an occasion that Chloe would have deemed inappropriate for someone my age. I applied makeup with care, no longer rushing to finish before someone needed something from me. When I finally emerged onto the deck, the Caribbean stretched before me in endless shades of blue. Other passengers nodded good morning, their faces relaxed and happy. No one here knew me as just Helen or Ryan's mother or the help. I was simply another woman enjoying the luxury of freedom. At breakfast in the main dining room, a waiter pulled out my chair and presented a menu with a flourish. "Good morning, Ms. Montgomery. Would you care for coffee or tea to start?" Such a small courtesy, yet it nearly brought tears to my eyes. When was the last time someone had served me? Had asked what I wanted rather than telling me what they needed? "Coffee, please," I managed to say. "And please call me Helen." As I savored a perfectly prepared Eggs Benedict, a dish I'd made countless times for Chloe's brunches, but rarely enjoyed myself, Rachel Porter appeared at my table. "Mind if I join you?" she asked, though she was already taking a seat. "I always check in with our special guests on the first morning. How was your cabin? Comfortable?" "It's lovely," I replied. "Everything is lovely." Rachel studied me over the rim of her coffee cup. "You turned your phone back on yet?" I shook my head. "Not ready." "Fair enough." She placed a slim folder on the table between us. "But whenever you are ready, I have a proposition for you. Our executive culinary director is retiring next month. We've been searching for someone with exactly your expertise to take over." I nearly choked on my coffee. "Rachel, I'm 52 years old. I haven't worked in a professional kitchen in years." She dismissed this with a wave. "You've been consulting for us for 3 years. Your ideas have transformed our dining program. Age is irrelevant. Experience is invaluable. She tapped the folder. Full benefits. Relocation assistance to our Miami headquarters, or remote work if you prefer to stay in Boston. Boston. The word hit me like a cold wave. My real life was still there. My son, my granddaughter. But also the role I'd allowed myself to be cast in. The invisible woman. The convenient grandmother. I need time to think, I said quietly. Rachel nodded. Of course, but Helen. She leaned forward. Just remember, you had a life before them. You can have one after too. After breakfast, I found a quiet spot on the deck and finally turned on my phone. The notification bar. Immediately filled with messages, voicemails, and missed calls. Mostly from Ryan, some from Chloe. I scrolled through the texts, watching the progression from confusion to panic to anger. Ryan, 7:45 p.m. Mom, where are you? Everyone's here and there's no food. Ryan, 8:12 p.m. This isn't funny. Chloe is freaking out. Please call me. Chloe, 8:34 p.m. How could you do this to us? You've humiliated me in front of everyone who matters in my career. Ryan, 9:01 p.m. Just let me know you're safe at least. I'm worried. The messages continued, hour by hour, growing more desperate, then resentful, then pleading. The final one had come just an hour ago. Ryan, 7:05 a.m. I found your note and the cruise confirmation email in your drawer when I was looking for clues about where you'd gone. I don't understand, Mom. Why didn't you just talk to me? That last message pierced my heart. My sweet boy, always trying to keep the peace. Always assuming reasonable discussion could solve everything. He'd never understood that some battles can't be won with words, especially when one person's voice has been systematically silenced. I started to compose a reply, then stopped. What could I say that I hadn't already tried to express 100 times before? Instead, I opened my email and found a new message from an unexpected source. From Olivia's school tablet subject, Miss You Grandma. The message contained just a simple drawing, a stick figure with gray hair standing on what appeared to be a boat, with a big smile on its face. Below, a smaller stick figure with a sad face, labeled Me Without. Grandma! My eyes filled with tears. Olivia. In all my justified anger toward Chloe, in my desperate need for respect, had I abandoned the person who needed me most? I quickly typed a response. I miss you too, sweetheart. Grandma needed a little vacation. I'll be back soon, and I'll bring you something special. I love you bigger than the ocean I'm sailing on. As I hit send, a notification popped. Up, a Boston area news blog with a headline that made my stomach drop. Social disaster. PR executive's holiday dinner debacle raises eyebrows in Beacon Hill. With trembling fingers, I tapped the link. The article was brief, but devastating. Sources report that Chloe Reynolds Montgomery, rising star at Apex Public Relations, suffered an embarrassing setback at her much-anticipated Christmas dinner when guests arrived to find no food prepared. Reynolds Montgomery had reportedly been boasting about an exclusive gourmet experience prepared by her mother-in-law, who was conspicuously absent. Guests, including several influential Boston media personalities and the fashion director from Vogue, departed after an awkward hour of empty plates and excuses. Below the article were comments, dozens of them, many gleeful in their schadenfreude. Always thought she was all talk. Looks like someone finally called her bluff. My friend was there. Said Chloe kept insisting her mother-in-law had abandoned them. But another guest mentioned she'd heard Chloe bragging about having free household help at a charity event last month. Karma? Whoever the mother-in-law is, I'd like to buy her a drink. I closed the browser, feeling suddenly ill. Yes, Chloe had treated me poorly. Yes, she'd taken advantage of my kindness and diminished my worth. But this public humiliation, this gloating over her downfall, it felt wrong, mean-spirited. This wasn't the lesson I'd intended to teach. My phone buzzed with an incoming call. Ryan. I took a deep breath and answered. Mom? His voice sounded tired, strained. Are you okay? I'm fine, Ryan. I'm on a cruise ship in the Caribbean. A long silence. Then, why didn't you just tell us you had plans for Christmas? We could have worked something out. The familiar frustration rose in my chest. Ryan, Chloe didn't ask if I had plans. She informed me I would be cooking for her friends. There's a difference. So this was, what? Revenge? Punishment? No, I said firmly. This was a boundary. Something I should have established years ago. He sighed heavily. Chloe is devastated, Mom. There's some article going around. Her boss called her in for a meeting. This affects her career. a twinge of guilt, quickly followed by resolve. I'm sorry about that. Truly. But Ryan, do you have any idea what these past 5 years have been like? For me? Being treated like an employee without pay, without respect, without even acknowledgement? You never said anything. How was I supposed to know? I tried. So many times. You always told me to keep the peace, to let it go. Another silence, longer this time. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, smaller. I messed up, didn't I? The simple admission broke something open inside. Me. 5 years of swallowed hurt rose to the surface. Yes, I whispered. You did. We all did. I let myself become invisible. You let it happen. Chloe orchestrated it. Olivia misses you, he said, changing tactics. She's been asking when you're coming home. Home. The word hung between us, its meaning suddenly unclear. Was that grand house on Beacon Hill, where I occupied the smallest bedroom and the largest share of the workload, really my home? I'll be back in a week, I said finally. The cruise ends on New Year's Eve. But Ryan, things are going to be different when I return. I can't go back to the way things were. I understand, he said, though I wasn't sure he did. Not yet. Just come back, okay? We'll figure it out. After we hung up, I stood at the ship's railing, watching the endless horizon. The wind brushed my face, carrying away the last of my tears. I hadn't realized I'd been crying. Rachel's folder sat in my bag, its contents promising a future I hadn't dared imagine. Independence, purpose, respect, but also distance from Olivia, from Ryan, from the family that, despite everything, I still loved. A choice was forming before me, like the distinct line where the sky meets the sea, stay or go, forgive or forget, fight or surrender. But for the first time in years, it was my choice to make, no one else's. And that knowledge alone felt like the first breath after a long time underwater. Another mimosa, Ms. Montgomery? I smiled at Diego, the pool attendant who'd been keeping my glass filled all morning. 3 days into the cruise, and the staff already knew. My preferences. Orange juice with extra champagne, 2 ice cubes, a sprig of mint. I probably shouldn't, I laughed, but nodded anyway. What were vacations for, if not a little indulgence? The sun warmed my skin as I reclined on a cushioned lounge chair, a novel open but unread on my lap. I'd forgotten how to relax, how to simply exist without constantly monitoring others' needs. The skill was returning slowly, like feeling coming back to a numbed limb, pleasant but also strangely painful. My phone, set to airplane mode most days, sat beside me. I allowed myself to check it once in the morning and once in the evening, enough to stay connected to Olivia, but not enough to be dragged back into the drama unfolding in Boston. And drama there was. According to Ryan's terse updates, Chloe had taken a leave of absence from her firm after the Christmas disaster made its way through Boston's social circles. Apparently, several of her clients had been among the hungry guests, and the incident had raised questions about her judgment and reliability, the very qualities a PR executive needs most. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt a complicated mix of guilt and concern. I'd wanted to teach Chloe a lesson about respect, not potentially derail her career. The consequences seemed disproportionate to the offense, even after years of dismissive treatment. "You look troubled," said a voice beside me, and I looked up to find Rachel Porter settling into the adjacent chair, elegant even in resort wear. "Bad news from home?" I shook my head. "Not exactly, just bigger ripples than I anticipated." Rachel nodded knowingly. "The butterfly effect. One small action, or in your case, inaction, and suddenly there's a hurricane on the other side of the world." She signaled to Diego for a drink of her own. "Having regrets?" "Not about taking the cruise," I said firmly. "I needed this, but perhaps about not giving them warning, about the public nature of it all. From what you've told me, would a warning have changed anything? Would Chloe have suddenly respected your right to a holiday? Or would she have manipulated you into staying?" The question hung in the air between us, and I knew the answer. Chloe would have made it impossible for me to leave. Tears, accusations, leveraging my love for Olivia. Still, I sighed, I never wanted her to suffer. Professionally. Rachel sipped her drink thoughtfully. "Perhaps that's the difference between you and her. You're concerned about her well-being even now. Has she ever shown the same consideration for yours?" Before I could answer, my phone lit up with an incoming FaceTime call from Olivia's tablet. I excused myself and moved to a quieter corner of the deck to answer. "Grandma!" Olivia's face filled the screen, her gap-toothed smile sending a wave of love and longing through me. "Are you on a big boat? Can I see the ocean?" I turned the phone to show her the expanse of blue surrounding us, delighting in her gasps of wonder. When I turned the camera back to myself, I noticed someone else had entered the frame behind her. Chloe, looking uncharacteristically disheveled, her normally perfect hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. "Olivia, honey, I told you not to call Grandma," she said, reaching for the tablet. "She's busy on her vacation." The way she said vacation made it sound like a betrayal. "But I miss her," Olivia protested, clutching the tablet closer. "And you said she abandoned us, but she didn't. She's just on a boat trip." I saw Chloe flinch at her daughter's innocent repetition of the accusation. Our eyes met through the screen, and for the first time, I saw something new in her expression. Not anger or entitlement, but uncertainty. Vulnerability. "It's fine, Olivia," I said quickly. "I'm never too busy to talk to you, and I'll be home for New Year's. Promise?" Her small face grew serious. "Because Daddy's sad and Mommy's been crying and nobody, makes pancakes the right way like you do." My heart constricted. "I promise, sweetheart, just a few more days." Chloe's hand appeared on Olivia's shoulder. "That's enough, honey. Go find Daddy and tell him lunch is ready." As Olivia reluctantly handed over the tablet, Chloe's face came into full view. The perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide the shadows under her eyes or the tightness around her mouth. For a moment, neither of us spoke. What do you say to someone who's simultaneously your family and your antagonist? "So," she finally said, her voice carefully controlled. "You've been consulting for cruise lines. All this time, I thought. That I had nothing better to do? That my only purpose was serving your household?" The words came out sharper than I'd intended. She looked away. "Ryan found your laptop, saw your emails, your contract with Oceanic. Of course. In his search for clues about my whereabouts, he'd discovered my secret professional life. The life I'd hidden because it had felt easier than defending my right to have one. I was going to tell you both eventually," I said, "when the time was right." "When would that have been, Helen?" A flash of the old Chloe surfaced. "After you'd humiliated me in front of everyone who matters in my world?" "That wasn't my intention," I said honestly. "I just needed to teach me a lesson?" "Well, mission accomplished. I've been put on probation at work. The dinner fiasco is all anyone's talking about. Even my mother called to lecture me about how to treat household staff." Her laugh was brittle. "Apparently, I'm not just a failure as a hostess, but as a human being as well." The hurt in her voice was real, and despite everything, I found myself wanting to comfort her. The maternal instinct impossible to fully suppress. But I'd spent too long prioritizing others' feelings over my own. "I'm sorry about your job," I said evenly. "But Chloe, this was never about a single dinner. This was about years of being treated as less than, of being taken for granted, of having my time, my skills, my very presence in your home treated as an entitlement rather than a gift." Her eyes widened slightly, as if this perspective had never occurred to her. "You could have said something. Would you have listened? Or would you have dismissed me as being oversensitive, dramatic? Would Ryan have backed me up or asked me, once again, to keep the peace?" Chloe was silent, her gaze dropping to her hands. When she looked up again, her expression had changed. "Rachel Porter," she said, the name clearly familiar to her. "She's the CEO of Oceanic Cruises." I nodded, unsure where this was going. "She's speaking at the Women in Business conference in Boston next month. My firm," she caught herself, "my former firm is handling the publicity." A pause. "Is she a friend of yours?" The question revealed so much about Chloe's worldview, the constant calculation of connections, of who might be useful, who might elevate her status. "Yes," I said simply. "She's offered me a job, actually, executive culinary director for the entire cruise line. I hadn't planned to share this information, but something in me wanted Chloe to see me clearly, perhaps for the first time, not as a convenient grandmother or unpaid housekeeper, but as a professional with expertise valuable enough to be headhunted by a luxury brand." The shock on her face was almost comical. "You'd leave? What about Olivia? What about Ryan? What about me?" I wanted to ask. But instead, I said, "I haven't decided yet. There's a lot to consider." Voice called from off-screen. Ryan summoning Chloe to lunch. She glanced away, then back at me. "We need to talk more when you get back. Really talk." Her voice had lost its edge, replaced with something that might have been respect, or at least recognition. Olivia needs you. We all do. The call ended, leaving me staring at my own reflection in the dark screen. Behind me, the ocean stretched, endlessly, full of possibility. Ahead of me lay Boston, with its complications and connections and history. That evening, I joined Rachel and several other executives for dinner at the ship's most exclusive restaurant, Northern Lights, the very concept I'd helped develop. As we were seated at the best table, Rachel introduced me to the others. This is Helen Montgomery, the visionary behind our most successful dining experience. Without her insights, we wouldn't have received that Michelin recognition last year. The others murmured appreciatively, asking questions about my background, my ideas for future concepts. They treated me as a peer, a valued contributor. No one commented on my age or asked about my family status or wondered why a woman my age wasn't retired or babysitting. Grandchildren. As the exquisite 7-course meal unfolded, each dish more beautiful and delicious than the last, I found myself mentally composing the menu I might have prepared for Chloe's Christmas dinner. The traditional turkey, certainly, but perhaps with a chestnut and pear stuffing instead of the usual bread version. A butternut squash soup with ginger cream. Chocolate peppermint mousse for dessert. You're doing it again, Rachel observed, touching my arm lightly. Drifting away to whatever storm is brewing back home, I smiled apologetically. Just professional curiosity, comparing notes. But the truth was more complex. Despite everything, despite the job offer and the luxury surrounding me and the respect I was finally receiving, part of me was still in that Boston townhouse. Still wondering how Ryan was coping. Still missing Olivia's bedtime stories and morning cuddles. The family tie I was discovering wasn't so easily severed, not even when it had been stretched to its breaking point. Later, as I prepared for bed in my elegant cabin, I found myself opening the photos on my phone, scrolling past the cruise images, sunsets and tropical drinks and smiling new acquaintances to the older ones. Olivia's 5th birthday. Ryan teaching her to ride a bike. Even Chloe laughing as she helped Olivia decorate Christmas cookies last year, flower dusting her usually immaculate blouse. These moments of genuine joy and connection had existed alongside the dismissal and disrespect. That was the messy reality of family, the beautiful tangled with the painful, the loving with the hurtful. The job offer folder sat on my nightstand, still unopened. Inside was a contract, a new beginning, a life defined by my own worth, rather than my usefulness to others. I picked it up, feeling its weight in my hands. Then I opened my laptop and began to write. Not a resignation letter to my family, nor an acceptance letter to Oceanic. Instead, I wrote something more difficult, more necessary. A list of boundaries, conditions for my return, terms of engagement for whatever came next. As the ship sailed on through the dark waters, carrying me closer to the inevitable reckoning awaiting in Boston, I finally felt ready to navigate those troubled waters. Not as the invisible woman I'd allowed myself to become, but as Helen Montgomery, grandmother, mother, professional, and, finally, after too long, her own advocate. The Boston skyline emerged through my taxi window, its familiar silhouette both welcoming and vaguely threatening. After a week of Caribbean sunshine, the gray December day felt appropriately somber for what lay ahead. The cruise had ended yesterday, New Year's Eve, but I'd opted to spend the night in a hotel, rather than immediately returning to the townhouse. I needed one more night of neutral territory, one more morning of waking up answerable only to myself. Now, as we approached Beacon Hill, I mentally rehearsed the boundaries I'd carefully drafted during those final days at sea. My phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. ETA, we're all home waiting. All. The word gave me pause. Chloe would be there too, of course. Our brief FaceTime, conversation hadn't resolved anything. It had merely acknowledged that there was something to resolve. Almost there. I texted back, suddenly aware of my pounding heart. I'd faced down hospitality industry titans, salvaged failing restaurants, and completely reinvented myself after my husband's death. Why should this confrontation frighten me so much? Because they're your family, whispered a ERA voice inside me. Because their rejection would hurt in ways professional setbacks never could. The taxi pulled up to the elegant townhouse I'd called home for the past 5 years. I paid the driver, declined his offer to carry my luggage to the door, and stood for a moment on the sidewalk, gathering my courage. Before I could ring the bell, the door swung open. Olivia burst out, launching herself into my arms with such force I nearly lost my balance. Grandma, you came back. Did you see dolphins? Did you bring me something? I lost a tooth. The words tumbled out in a rush of 5-year-old enthusiasm. I hugged her tightly, inhaling the sweet, familiar scent of her hair. Yes to all of those questions, especially the present part. And look at that tooth gap. The tooth fairy must have been very generous. Ryan appeared in the doorway, his expression a mixture of relief and apprehension. "Welcome home, Mom." He stepped forward to take my suitcase, then hesitated, as if unsure whether such a gesture would be welcomed or seen as presumptuous. I handed it to him with a small smile. "Thank you, Ryan." Inside, the house was immaculate, more so than usual. The hardwood floors gleamed, fresh. Flowers adorned the entryway table. The scent of something delicious, not my cooking, wafted from the kitchen. And there, hovering uncertainly in the living room doorway, stood Chloe. Her hair was perfectly styled again, her makeup flawless. But something was different. The usual confidence in her posture was missing, replaced by an almost imperceptible tension. "Helen," she said, her voice carefully modulated. "Welcome back." An awkward silence fell between us, broken by Olivia tugging at my hand. "Come see the drawing I made for you. And Daddy cooked dinner. He's been practicing all week because he said you deserved a break." Ryan cooking? That was certainly new. I allowed Olivia to lead me toward the dining room, noticing as I passed that the guest bedroom door, my bedroom door, was open. Inside, everything looked different. The faded comforter had been replaced with what appeared to be a new duvet set. The rickety desk where I'd secretly conducted my consulting work was gone, replaced by a sleek new model with an ergonomic chair. Fresh curtains hung at the windows. "We thought you might like a little update," Ryan explained, following my gaze. "It was Chloe's idea." "Actually," I glanced at my daughter-in-law, who was watching me with an unreadable expression. "It felt like the least we could do," she said quietly. The dining room table was set for 4, with the good china usually reserved for Chloe's entertaining. In the center sat a beautiful arrangement of winter flowers and candles. "It's not Christmas dinner," Ryan said, a hint of apology in his voice. "But we wanted to do something special for your return." I sat where directed, still feeling slightly off balance by this reception. I'd prepared for anger, for defensiveness, for attempts to make me feel guilty. I hadn't prepared for whatever this was. "Before we eat," Chloe said, taking her seat across from me, I have something for you." She slid a small, wrapped package across the table. I opened it slowly, aware of 3 pairs of eyes watching me intently. Inside was a key on an elegant silver keychain. "It's to the front door," Ryan explained. "Your own key, because this is your home too, Mom. Not just a place you stay because we need you." The simple gesture brought unexpected tears to my eyes. A key. Such a basic symbol of belonging, of having the right to come and go on one's own terms. "And this," Chloe added, passing me an envelope, "is something else we thought you should have." Inside was a check, a substantial one, with my name on it. "What's this for?" I asked, though I could guess. "Back pay," she said simply. "It's not enough. Not for 5 years of everything. But it's a start." I looked from the check to Chloe's face, searching for the catch, the hidden agenda. But her expression held none of the calculation I was accustomed to seeing there. "We read your email," Ryan said, referring to the boundaries list I'd sent them 2 days ago. "All of it. And you're right, Mom. We've taken advantage of you. We've treated your time and skills as if they belong to us by default." "I've been the worst offender," Chloe added, her voice steady but quieter than usual. "I've been disrespectful and entitled, and there's no excuse for it." I hadn't expected this immediate acknowledgement. I'd prepared for resistance, for negotiation. The straightforward acceptance left me momentarily speechless. Olivia, bored with the adult conversation, piped up. "Mommy cried when she read your letter. She said she'd been a terrible human person." "Olivia," Chloe admonished, a flush rising in her cheeks. "Private family conversations, remember?" But the innocent revelation broke the tension. I found myself smiling, then laughing softly. "Well, I wouldn't go that far." "I would," Chloe said with surprising candor. "The cruise, the Christmas dinner, it forced me to see myself through other people's eyes, and I didn't like what I saw." She took a deep breath. "My boss called me in after the holiday. I thought she was going to fire me, but instead, she said something I can't stop thinking about. She said, 'Chloe, in PR, we manage perceptions, but you've been so busy managing how others perceive you that you've lost sight of who you actually are.'" Ryan reached over to squeeze his wife's hand supportively. The gesture reminded me of their early days together, before the ambition and social climbing had changed their dynamic. So, Chloe continued, we've made some decisions. If you'll stay, and we really hope you will, things will be different. She glanced at Ryan, who nodded encouragingly. We've hired a part-time housekeeper, 3 days a week to start, and we've researched nanny services for the days you might want to pursue other opportunities. Like the job with Oceanic, Ryan added. Chloe mentioned you have an offer. I nodded, surprised they were acknowledging it so directly. I do. It's a good one. We don't want to stand in your way, Chloe said, and for once, her PR-polished voice held genuine emotion. But we also don't want to lose you, Helen, especially Olivia. So we thought, maybe there's a compromise? The dinner that followed was unlike any meal we'd shared in that house before. Ryan served a surprisingly competent coq au vin, my signature dish, which he'd apparently been practicing all week. Chloe poured the wine and cleared the plates, waving away my offers to help. Olivia chattered about her missing tooth and the dolphins she hoped I'd seen, and I found myself watching them all with new eyes. The family dynamics I'd taken as fixed and immutable suddenly seemed fluid, capable of change. The roles we'd all fallen into, the entitled daughter-in-law, the peacemaking son, the invisible grandmother, were not, perhaps, as permanent as I'd believed. After Olivia was tucked into bed with promises of cruise stories and present opening in the morning, the three of us adults sat in the living room with after-dinner coffee. The heavy crystal clock on the mantel ticked away the seconds, marking the first evening of a new year and, possibly, a new chapter. I've been thinking about your boundaries list, Chloe began, setting down her cup. All of them are reasonable. More than reasonable. Regular days off. No last-minute childcare without asking first. Acknowledgement of your contributions when we have guests. She met my eyes directly. The fact that you even had to ask for these things. I'm genuinely ashamed, Helen. And the Oceanic job? I asked. How does that fit into your vision? Ryan leaned forward. We want you to take it, Mom. If that's what you want. We can make it work. Whether that means you're traveling part of the time or working remotely, or even if you decide to relocate to Miami. His voice caught slightly on the last option. Olivia would miss you terribly. We all would. But you've put your life on hold for us long enough. I studied my son's face, so like his father's, especially now as he approached 40. I'd always tried to raise him to be kind, to respect others, to stand up for what was right. Somewhere along the way, in his desire to keep peace with his ambitious wife, he'd lost sight of some of those values. But the man sitting before me now, earnestly promising to support my choices, looked more like the son I'd raised. I haven't decided yet, I admitted. Rachel, Ms. Porter, has given me until the end of January to consider the offer. Chloe nodded thoughtfully. She's giving the keynote at that conference I mentioned. Maybe you could, attend with me? I know she'd be pleased to see you there, and it might help you get a better sense of the company culture before you decide. The invitation surprised me. Not just its content, but the way Chloe offered it, not as a networking opportunity for herself, but as a genuine gesture to help me make my decision. I'd like that, I said simply. As I retired to my refreshed bedroom that night, laying my head on new pillows that someone had thoughtfully purchased, I felt both exhausted and strangely energized. The confrontation I dreaded had turned into something unexpected. Not an ending, but potentially a new beginning. The cruise ticket that had started it all was still in my wallet. I took it out, running my fingers over the embossed Oceanic logo. What had begun as an escape, a desperate bid for recognition, had transformed into something else entirely. A catalyst, perhaps, for all of us. I tucked the ticket into my bedside drawer, alongside the job offer folder and my new house key. Symbols of choice, of possibility, of respect finally given, and boundaries finally acknowledged. Tomorrow would bring more conversations, more negotiations of our new family dynamic. There would be missteps and old habits to overcome. But tonight, in the quiet of a room that finally felt like my own space, I allowed myself to hope that this time, the changes might actually last. January brought with it a brittle cold snap and the tentative implementation of our new family arrangement. The hired housekeeper, Mrs. Patel, arrived each Monday, Wednesday, and Friday morning at 9 sharp, her efficiency both impressive and slightly intimidating. At first, I found myself trailing behind her, explaining how things were usually done, until she gently but firmly suggested I might enjoy a morning to myself instead. I have been doing this work for 25 years, Mrs. Montgomery, she said with a smile that softened her words. The house will survive if I fold the towels differently than you do. It was a small comment, but it highlighted how accustomed I'd become to being the household manager, how much of my identity had become wrapped up in the minutiae of running a home that wasn't even mine. Chloe, true to her word, had adjusted her approach dramatically. Gone were the imperious commands and last-minute demands. Instead, she'd instituted a family calendar on the refrigerator where everyone's commitments and needs were clearly marked. If she required my help with Olivia, she actually asked, at least 3 days in advance. I have a late client meeting on Thursday, she'd say over breakfast. Would you be able to pick up Olivia from school and stay with her until about 6? I'd really appreciate it. The first few times I'd been so startled by the request format that I'd simply nodded, half expecting the old Chloe to resurface at any moment. But as the days passed and the new pattern held, I began to relax into the novel sensation of having my time respected. Ryan, too, was making efforts. He'd begun coming home earlier from work several days a week, taking on bedtime stories and bath duty without being prompted. He'd even instituted a weekly guys' night where he and Olivia's friend Noah's father would take the children for pizza and arcade games, giving both mothers a few hours of freedom. The most surprising change, however, was in how I was introduced to their social circle. At a small dinner party in mid-January, one where I was explicitly invited as a guest, not expected to cook, Chloe introduced me to a sorority colleague with unexpected words. This is Helen, Ryan's mother. She's a culinary consultant for Oceanic Cruises. They're trying to poach her for a full-time executive position. The pride in her voice was unmistakable, as was the impressed response from her colleague. I caught Ryan's eye across the room, and he raised his glass slightly in acknowledgement. A small gesture, but meaningful. The job offer remained in my bedside drawer, neither accepted nor rejected. Rachel called occasionally with gentle nudges. That office in Miami isn't going to wait forever, Helen, but respected my need for time. The irony wasn't lost on me. After years of having my time treated as infinitely available, I now had 2 different parties, my family and Oceanic, patiently waiting for my decision, treating my choices as valuable. My consulting work continued, with one significant change. I no longer hid it. I'd set up my new desk properly, with dual monitors and an ergonomic keyboard. When I had video calls, I closed my door, and everyone respected the boundary. Even Olivia had learned to check if Grandma's red light, a small LED lamp I'd placed outside my door, was on before knocking. One frigid afternoon in late January, as I was finalizing a menu proposal for Oceanic's Mediterranean routes, a knock came at my door despite the red light. I opened it to find Chloe, looking uncharacteristically nervous. I'm sorry to interrupt your work, she said, and I could tell she meant it. But I was hoping we could talk about the Women in Business conference next week. I invited her in, clearing space on my small sitting area. She perched on the edge of the armchair, clutching a leather portfolio. Rachel Porter's keynote has been expanded, she explained. She wants to do a panel discussion afterward on women supporting other women in the workplace, and she's asked if you would participate. I blinked in surprise. Me? I'm hardly an authority on women in business. I've been out of the traditional workforce for years. Chloe shook her head. That's exactly why she wants you. Your perspective on returning to executive-level work after a period of family caregiving. How women's expertise doesn't expire, it evolves. She hesitated. Also, she mentioned something about how different generations of women can learn from each other instead of competing. The subtext wasn't difficult to decipher. Rachel, ever the shrewd businesswoman, was creating a public opportunity for Chloe and me to demonstrate our new dynamic. A form of reputation rehabilitation for Chloe, perhaps, but also a genuine platform for an important conversation. You don't have to decide right now, Chloe added quickly. I know it's short notice and public speaking isn't everyone's. I'll do it, I interrupted, surprising both of us. On one condition. Anything, she said immediately, and the eagerness in her voice reminded me that, despite her renewed standing at her firm, the Christmas disaster had left lasting damage to her professional reputation. You help me prepare. I haven't spoken publicly in years and certainly never about anything this personal. The relief on her face was palpable. Absolutely. We can work on talking points, practice questions, even your outfit if you'd like. I know it might seem superficial, but presentation matters in these settings, and she caught herself. I'm sorry. I'm jumping ahead. We can do as much or as little prep as you're comfortable with. I smiled, recognizing the professional Chloe emerging. the competent PR executive whose skills I'd rarely been able to appreciate when they were overshadowed by her personal treatment of me. "I'd welcome your expertise," I said sincerely. "This isn't my world anymore." She nodded, relaxing slightly. "Thank you. For considering it, at least." She stood to leave, then paused. "Helen, there's something else you should know. About Rachel Porter." "What about her?" Chloe's expression turned serious. "I did some research, preparing for the conference. She's been quite open about her management philosophy in recent interviews, about building teams of people with diverse experiences and perspectives." She met my eyes directly. "The job she's offering you. It's not charity or a favor to an old friend. From everything I can tell, she genuinely believes you're the best person for that role." The validation coming from Chloe of all people caught me off guard. For so long, I'd assumed my daughter-in-law saw me as past my prime, useful only for domestic support. To hear her acknowledge my professional value felt strangely healing. "Thank you for telling me that," I said quietly. After she left, I returned to my computer, but found myself unable to focus on Mediterranean menu planning. Instead, I pulled up the oceanic job description and read it again with fresh eyes, not as an escape route from a difficult family situation, but as a genuine opportunity to contribute meaningfully to a company I respected. For the first time, I allowed myself to truly envision accepting the position, not out of spite or desperation, but because I wanted it, because I'd earned it, because the expertise I'd developed over decades of work, both professional and domestic, had value in the world beyond this townhouse. The conference arrived the following week, held in one of Boston's grand waterfront hotels. Chloe had indeed helped me prepare, arranging a shopping trip for a suitable outfit, a tailored navy suit that made me feel both professional and confident, and coaching me through likely questions. As we entered the hotel ballroom together, I was struck by how different this felt from our previous public outings. We walked side by side, not with me trailing behind. When Chloe greeted colleagues, she introduced me properly, with pride rather than dismissal. Several times she even directed conversations toward my expertise. Helen was just telling me about the sustainability challenges in cruise dining. You'd find it fascinating given your work with ecotourism. Rachel spotted us from across the room and made her way over, commanding attention in a crimson suit and statement jewelry. "Helen, and this must be the famous Chloe." She extended her hand warmly. "I've been looking forward to meeting you. Your work on the conference publicity has been excellent." Chloe accepted the compliment graciously, but I noticed she didn't preen or posture as she might have in the past. Instead, she replied, "Thank you. It's an honor to be involved. Your keynote has generated tremendous interest." "Well, it's about to get even more interesting with the panel edition," Rachel said with a wink in my direction. "Helen, shall we go over the format before things get started?" As Rachel led me away to the speaker's preparation area, I glanced back at Chloe, expecting to see her usual flash of resentment at being excluded from an inner circle. Instead, she gave me an encouraging thumbs up, mouthing, "You'll be great." The keynote itself was brilliant. Rachel weaving personal anecdotes with industry insights, discussing how traditional corporate structures often undervalued the skills women developed through caregiving roles. "We talk about workforce re-entry, as if these women have been sitting idle," she said passionately. "But managing a household budget, coordinating multiple schedules, mediating conflicts, multitasking under pressure, these are executive skills being honed every day outside the office." The panel discussion that followed included Rachel, myself, and two other women, a tech CEO and a returning veteran who'd started her own business. As the moderator directed questions about career transitions and intergenerational workplace dynamics, I found myself speaking with unexpected confidence about my journey from successful restaurant consultant to family caregiver to cruise line executive in waiting. "The most important lesson I've learned," I said in response to a question about advice for women considering a late career pivot, "is that respect must flow in both directions. Younger generations have fresh perspectives and technological fluency that's invaluable. But experience and institutional knowledge matter too. When we stop seeing each other as competition and start recognizing complementary strengths, everyone benefits, including the bottom line." From my seat on the stage, I could see Chloe in the audience, nodding thoughtfully. Our eyes met briefly, and I realized that we'd both been guilty of the same sin, of dismissing each other's value, of failing to see what each of us brought to the table. After the panel concluded and the audience dispersed for the networking reception, Rachel pulled me aside. "That was exactly why I wanted you on that panel," she said, squeezing my arm. Authentic, wise, and practical. Now, about that job offer. I've made my decision, I interrupted gently, but I'd like to propose an adjustment to the terms. She raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. I want the position, but I need flexibility on location. Partial remote work with travel to Miami as needed, but based primarily here in Boston. I took a breath. My family is here, Rachel. Not just my son and his wife, but my granddaughter. I've missed too much of her life already, buried in resentment. I don't want to miss any more. Rachel studied me thoughtfully. You know, when you first told me about your situation during the cruise, I assumed you'd want to get as far away from Boston as possible. Start completely fresh. So did I admitted. But it turns out running away isn't the same as moving forward. She nodded slowly. We can make it work. 3 weeks remote, 1 week in Miami per month. Quarterly extended stays for seasonal menu planning. Plus the cruise evaluations themselves, of course. She extended her hand. Do we have a deal? Executive Culinary Director Montgomery. As we shook hands, I caught sight of Chloe hovering nearby, trying not to look like she was eavesdropping. I beckoned her over. Chloe, I believe you know my new boss? Her eyes widened, and a genuine smile spread across her face. You took the job? That's wonderful, Helen. Congratulations. With a Boston-based arrangement, Rachel added. Helen made a compelling case for geographic flexibility. The relief in Chloe's expression was unmistakable and surprisingly touching. She genuinely worried I might leave. More surprisingly, I realized I'd have genuinely missed her if I had. Not just Ryan and Olivia, but Chloe too, with all her complexities and contradictions. The woman who'd once dismissed me was now celebrating my success, and the transformation seemed as real as my own. As we made our way through the reception afterward, I found myself reflecting on the journey of the past month, from invisible grandmother to professional panelist, from taken for granted to respected consultant, from resentful family member to whatever we were becoming now. Not quite friends, perhaps, but no longer adversaries. Family, in all its messy, evolving glory. That evening, as we drove home together, Chloe at the wheel, me still processing the day's events, she broke a comfortable silence with an unexpected question. Do you know what Olivia said the other day, when I was helping her with homework? She said, I want to be like Grandma when I grow up. She doesn't let people be mean to her anymore. I felt my throat tighten with emotion. She said that? Chloe nodded, keeping her eyes on the road. Out of the mouths of babes, right? It made me realize the example we were setting for her, what we were teaching her about how women should treat each other, about self-respect. She glanced at me briefly. So, thank you. Not just for staying, but for leaving when you did. We needed that wake-up call. As we pulled into the driveway of the townhouse, now truly our shared home, I thought about the empty dining room of Christmas Eve, the humiliation on Chloe's face, the confused guests with their unfilled plates. What had seemed like an act of rebellion, even revenge, had ultimately been an act of restoration. Painful but necessary, like setting a broken bone so it could heal properly. We're going to make mistakes, I said as we gathered our things from the car. All of us. This new arrangement won't be perfect. No, Chloe agreed. But at least now we're trying. Really trying. She smiled ruefully. And if we mess up too badly, you can always book another cruise. We both laughed, the sound carrying in the cold night air. Not the polite social laughter of previous years, but something genuine and shared. A new beginning, built on the honest acknowledgement of what had come before. Spring arrived in Boston with its characteristic unpredictability. Warm, sunshine-filled days followed by sudden, chilling rains. My life had taken on a similar pattern of contrasts. The peaceful, focused solitude of my consulting work juxtaposed with the lively chaos of family dinners, serene mornings in my newly respected personal space, followed by afternoons of playground adventures with Olivia. 3 months had passed since I'd accepted the modified position with Oceanic. The arrangement, 3 weeks remote, 1 week in Miami each month, had proven both challenging and invigorating. During my Boston weeks, I transformed my bedroom into a fully functional office, complete with proper lighting, ergonomic furniture, and a do not disturb sign that everyone, remarkably, actually respected. My first week in Miami had been disorienting, almost overwhelming after years of domestic routine. I'd found myself in a sleek corner office overlooking Biscayne Bay, surrounded by ambitious young culinary professionals who looked to me for direction. The imposter syndrome had hit hard. until Rachel arranged a dinner where the executive team openly shared their own moments of professional doubt and uncertainty. Everyone feels it, the CFO had confided, swirling his wine thoughtfully. The trick isn't eliminating the fear. It's acknowledging it and moving forward anyway. Now, as I packed for my 4th Miami trip, the process had become almost routine. Chloe no longer hovered anxiously, asking if I'd return on schedule. Ryan no longer overprepared as if I were leaving for months instead of days. And Olivia had come to enjoy our special reunion breakfasts, where I'd bring her exotic fruits from Florida and tell her stories of the big ships and the people who kept them running. I still haven't fully unpacked, I called to Chloe, who was passing by my open door with a basket of laundry. Her own laundry, a small but significant change from the days when all household chores automatically defaulted to me. She paused, leaning against the doorframe. Need any help? I've gotten pretty good at efficient packing since that conference in Chicago last month. I smiled, still occasionally startled by these casual offers of assistance. I'm almost done, but thanks. How was your meeting this morning? Chloe set down the laundry basket with a sigh of relief. Productive. The agency wants me to head up the new wellness tourism division. More responsibility, better title. She hesitated. But also more travel. Ah. I folded a blouse carefully into my suitcase. How do you feel about that? Conflicted, she admitted, sinking onto the edge of my bed. Career-wise, it's exactly what I've been working toward. But with Olivia, I nodded, understanding perfectly. The eternal balancing act of working motherhood. A challenge that transcended generations, despite all our supposed progress. You know, I said carefully, when Ryan was young, after his father died, I turned down several opportunities to expand my catering business. I told myself it was because Olivia needed stability, which was partly true, but I was also afraid. Afraid of what? Of failing, of trying to be both a perfect mother and a successful professional, and inevitably falling short at both. I closed the suitcase and zipped it shut. In retrospect, I think I could have found a better balance. Ryan would have been fine with a mother who wasn't always available but was fulfilled and confident in her choices. Chloe's expression grew thoughtful. Like you are now. Exactly. It took me until my 50s to learn that lesson, but it's never too late. I smiled. And for what it's worth, I think you're a better mother when you're professionally satisfied, more patient, more present when you are here. That's surprisingly nice to hear. She twisted a strand of hair around her finger, a rare nervous gesture from someone usually so composed. Especially from you. The unspoken acknowledgement hung between us. How far we'd come from the days when she dismissed my opinions and experiences as irrelevant, when any advice from me would have been met with thinly veiled contempt. If you take the position, I said, we can make it work. Between Ryan, me, Mrs. Patel, and the part-time nanny, Olivia will have plenty of support. I met her eyes directly. The important thing is being honest with yourself about what you need, and with Olivia about why you're doing it. Chloe nodded slowly. Like you've been doing. Showing her that Grandma has important work too. That she's valued by people outside this house. Exactly. I checked my watch. Speaking of which, I should head to the airport. My flight's in 3 hours. As I wheeled my suitcase to the door, Chloe followed, still seemingly lost in thought. In the entryway, we found Ryan and Olivia returning from the park, pink-cheeked and laughing. Grandma's leaving, Olivia announced dramatically, as if this were breaking news rather than a monthly occurrence. But she's coming back on Sunday with special Florida oranges. I knelt to hug her, inhaling the outdoor scent of playground dust and strawberry shampoo. That's right, sweetheart. And maybe something else special too. We'll see what treasures I can find. Ryan embraced me next, no longer the awkward, guilt-ridden son of months past, but a man who'd grown into a new understanding of our relationship. Safe travels, Mom. Call when you land. Always do. As the taxi pulled away, I glimpsed the three of them in the doorway. Ryan with his arm around Chloe, Olivia waving enthusiastically between them. My family, reconfigured but intact. Changed, but perhaps stronger for it. The Miami office hummed with pre-weekend energy when I arrived the next morning. My team, still a phrase that gave me a small thrill, had prepared for our menu testing session, the conference room transformed into an impromptu tasting area with white tablecloths and proper place settings. We're focusing on the Scandinavian roots today, explained Diego, my eager assistant who'd once served me poolside cocktails and now coordinated my executive schedule with impressive efficiency. The chefs have prepared 7 concepts for your evaluation. The morning unfolded in a satisfying blur of flavors, textures, and animated discussion. I guided the team through adjustments, suggesting a lighter hand with the dill here, a more pronounced juniper flavor there. We debated the merits of traditional presentation versus contemporary styling, and I found myself drawing on both my formal culinary training and the practical wisdom gained from years of feeding a family. The cardamom needs to come through more strongly, I advised the pastry chef, a talented young woman who'd trained in Copenhagen. It should be the first note, then mellowing into the almond flavor. She nodded, making rapid notes. Like in a proper Swedish fika, I'll adjust the ratios. Later, as we reviewed the finalized menu concepts, Rachel joined us, slipping quietly into the seat beside me. She listened for several minutes before offering her own insights, then turned to me with approval. You've really found your stride, Helen. The team responds to you. They're talented, I replied. They just needed someone to help them focus their creativity in practical directions. Rachel smiled. Exactly why I hired you. The perfect blend of vision and pragmatism. She lowered her voice. How's the arrangement working? Being split between two cities? Better than I expected, I admitted. The boundaries are clear, the expectations manageable, and the contrast is actually energizing. My time here makes me appreciate home, and vice versa. And your daughter-in-law? Has she maintained the reformed attitude? I considered this carefully. It's not perfect. We still have moments of tension, but there's respect now, on both sides. We're actually learning from each other. Speaking of learning, Rachel said, gathering her papers, the board wants to expand our mentorship program for women returning to the workforce after caregiving breaks. I immediately thought of you as a potential leader for the initiative. No pressure, just something to consider. The suggestion followed me through the remainder of my Miami week, through executive meetings and culinary workshops, through evening phone calls with Olivia and late-night menu revisions. The idea of helping other women navigate the transition I'd made, of transforming my personal journey into a professional resource for others, resonated deeply. On my final evening in Miami, I found myself on the balcony of my company apartment, watching the sunset paint the bay in shades of gold and pink. My phone buzzed with a text from Chloe. Took the position? Ryan, fully supportive. Family meeting planned for your return to coordinate schedules. P.S. Olivia says sea monsters miss you. I smiled at the reference to our ongoing imaginative game, where sea monsters lived under Olivia's bed, but were terrified of her brave grandmother. The simple text message represented so many positive changes. Chloe making her own. Career decisions without guilt. Ryan actively supporting her choices. Both of them including me in the family planning as an equal participant, rather than a convenience. As I flew back to Boston that Sunday, my thoughts drifted to the strange, winding path that had led me here. How a Christmas dinner never served had ultimately nourished something far more important than holiday appetites. How my desperate bid for recognition had catalyzed genuine change for everyone involved. The townhouse was quiet when I arrived. A note on the kitchen counter explaining that they'd taken Olivia to a classmate's birthday party and would return by 4. I unpacked leisurely, placing the promised Florida oranges in a bowl and setting Olivia's small gift, a handcrafted mermaid doll from a Miami artisan, on her pillow. In my bedroom, I found a surprise of my own, a sleek new laptop on my desk with a simple card propped against it. For your mentorship program planning. The old one was embarrassing us all. See. The thoughtful gesture, practical yet personal, acknowledging both my professional value and our shared family identity, perfectly symbolized our new dynamic. Not just peaceful coexistence, but active support of each other's growth. When they returned, flushed with birthday cake and excitement, Olivia launched into a detailed account of the party's magic show, while Ryan began preparing dinner, a simple pasta dish he'd mastered during my previous Miami trip. Chloe joined me at the kitchen island, speaking quietly beneath Olivia's enthusiastic narrative. I accepted the position on my condition, that I could set my own travel schedule around family priorities. She smiled wryly. I may have mentioned that I learned the importance of work-life boundaries from my extremely competent mother-in-law. Well, I replied, matching her tone. Your extremely competent mother-in-law is considering a mentorship initiative focusing on exactly that challenge. Perhaps I'll need a guest. Speaker from the PR world. Perhaps you will. She handed me a glass of wine. Welcome home, Helen. Later, as we gathered around the dining table, the same mahogany expanse that had stood empty and accusatory on Christmas Eve, I looked at the faces of my family. Ryan, more confident in his dual roles as father and son. Chloe, her ambition now tempered with awareness of others' needs. Olivia, absorbing it all, learning from our mistakes and our growth. And me, Helen Montgomery, no longer invisible, no longer silent, no longer defined solely by what I could provide for others. The cruise ticket that had started it all was framed now, hanging in my bedroom as a reminder of the moment I'd finally chosen myself. Not out of selfishness, but out of the recognition that respecting oneself is the necessary foundation for respecting others. That lesson, more than any gourmet meal I could have prepared, was the true gift I'd given my family that Christmas. And as we passed dishes around the table, talking and laughing in the warm evening light, I realized we were finally feasting together as equals. "Grandma, they're here!" Olivia's excited call echoed through the townhouse as she pressed her face against the front window, her breath creating small clouds on the cold glass. I smoothed my apron and took a final glance at the dining room. The table was set for 12, crystal glasses catching the light from the chandelier, elegant name cards marking each place. Flowers and candles formed a tasteful centerpiece, and from the kitchen wafted the rich, complex aromas of a truly special meal. 1 year. It had been exactly 1 year since I'd walked out on Chloe's Christmas dinner, leaving behind an empty table and a lifetime of unspoken resentments. Now I stood in the same space, surrounded by the evidence of how completely our lives had transformed in those 12 months. "Mom, should I open more wine to breathe?" Ryan called from the kitchen, where he was arranging the cheese platter, a task he'd taken on with unexpected enthusiasm since discovering a hidden talent for food presentation. "The Cabernet and the Pinot Noir are already open," I replied. "That should be plenty to start." Chloe emerged from their bedroom, elegant in a deep green dress, fastening an earring as she walked. "Helen, Rachel's assistant called. They're running about 15 minutes. Late. Traffic from the airport." She glanced at the dining room and nodded approvingly. "Everything looks perfect. Can I help with anything else?" "Just greet our other guests while I finish the sauce," I said, returning to the kitchen where the final elements of our meal waited. This Christmas dinner had been my idea, a deliberate reclaiming of the holiday that had marked our lowest point. But, unlike last year's commanded performance, this was a true collaboration. Chloe had handled the invitations and table styling. Ryan had selected the wines and would serve as host. I had designed the menu and prepared the main courses, but as a choice freely made, not an obligation fulfilled. And the guest list? A careful curation of our new reality. Rachel Porter and her husband, flying in, specifically for the occasion. 2 of my oceanic colleagues who'd become friends during my Miami weeks. Chloe's parents, with whom I developed an unexpectedly warm relationship after the truth of my professional background emerged. Ryan's mentor from his investment firm and his wife. And at the center of it all, Olivia, now 6 and insistent on having her own place at the grown-up table. The doorbell rang, and I heard Chloe's warm greeting as the first guests arrived. From my position in the kitchen, I could observe without being immediately drawn into conversation. A perfect vantage point to appreciate how naturally Ryan and Chloe move together now, complementing rather than competing with each other. "Mom runs the mentorship program," I heard Chloe explaining to her father. "It's already helped 15 women transition back to executive positions after career breaks for caregiving." The pride in her voice was unmistakable and genuine. In the past year, we'd become each other's unexpected advocates. She promoted my professional initiatives within her PR circles. I shared parenting wisdom when requested, and only when requested. We'd found our way to mutual respect, not by ignoring our differences, but by finally acknowledging them as potential strengths rather than inevitable conflicts. As I put the finishing touches on the sauce, Rachel appeared in the kitchen doorway, elegant in a burgundy pantsuit, despite her just-off-a-plane status. "There she is," she announced, crossing to embrace me warmly. "The woman who turned down a corner office in Miami for a kitchen in Boston and somehow made both locations better for it." I laughed, returning the hug. "Hardly. But the balance seems to be working for everyone." She glanced around the kitchen, noting the professional-grade equipment that had gradually replaced the outdated appliances. "I see you've made some upgrades." "Joint investment," I explained. "Since I'm developing recipes here for half the month, Oceanic covered part of the costs as a home office setup. The rest we split 3 ways." "Smart arrangement." Rachel leaned against the counter, lowering her voice slightly. "Speaking of arrangements, have you considered my proposal about expanding your role next year?" The proposal in question would increase my responsibilities significantly, overseeing not just the culinary program but all guests. Experience elements across the oceanic fleet. It would mean more travel, more authority, more compensation, and more complexity in our carefully balanced family ecosystem. Still thinking, I replied honestly. There's a lot to consider. Of course. She straightened as Ryan entered with empty wine glasses. Take your time. The opportunity isn't going anywhere. As Rachel departed with Ryan for the living room, Chloe slipped into the kitchen, automatically reaching for serving utensils without being asked. Need these out there? She confirmed, gesturing to the appetizer platters. I nodded. Rachel mentioned the promotion again. Chloe paused, her expression careful. And? What are you thinking? That it's a lot to balance with my commitments here. With Olivia. She set down the platters, turning to face me directly. Helen, you know we support whatever you decide. The past year has proven we can adapt. A small smile. Besides, I've been offered a position on the board of the Children's Museum. Extra evening meetings, occasional weekend events. I was going to talk to you about it after the holidays. I raised an eyebrow. Sounds like we both have opportunities to consider. And a family meeting to schedule, she agreed. But not tonight. Tonight we celebrate how far we've come. Together, we carried the final dishes to the dining room, where conversation flowed easily among our gathered guests. Ryan stood to welcome everyone officially, his confidence as a host visibly grown since the days when he'd deferred all social orchestration to Chloe. Before we begin, he said, raising his glass, I'd like to propose a toast to family, both born and chosen, to second chances and new beginnings, and especially to my mother, Helen, who taught us all that respect must be earned, not assumed. Glasses clinked around the table as eyes turned to me with warmth and appreciation. Such a different scene from the empty confusion of last year, yet connected to it by an unbroken thread of transformation. And to Helen's cooking, added Rachel with a grin, which I'm selfishly glad she decided to share with her family tonight instead of with our passengers in the Caribbean. Laughter rippled around the table as we settled into our meal. The conversation flowed naturally between professional achievements and personal anecdotes, between Olivia's school adventures and Chloe's upcoming projects. No artificial divisions between work and family, between status and substance. As we moved from the main course to dessert, a spectacular Black Forest cake that Ryan and Olivia had insisted on helping prepare, I found myself seated temporarily beside Chloe's father, a retired judge with a thoughtful demeanor. Remarkable turnaround, he commented quietly, nodding toward Chloe, who was deep in conversation with one of my oceanic colleagues about marketing strategies. I've never seen my daughter so balanced, so authentically herself. She's worked hard this year, I acknowledged. We all have. You know, he said, studying me with shrewd eyes. When she first told us about the Christmas disaster, we were mortified, embarrassed by her behavior, concerned about her reputation. He smiled wryly. But in retrospect, it might have been the best thing that could have happened to her. To all of you. Before I could respond, Olivia appeared at my elbow, her formal dinner attire slightly rumpled after an evening of excited movement between her seat and various adults' laps. Grandma, she whispered loudly, can I tell everyone about the surprise? Now? I checked the time. Nearly midnight. Perfect. Yes, sweetheart. Go ahead. Olivia stood on her chair despite Chloe's gentle attempt to dissuade her, and tapped her spoon against her water glass with surprising authority for a 6-year-old. Attention, everyone, it's almost Christmas, and Grandma said I could tell you about the surprise. She paused dramatically, clearly having inherited some of her mother's flair for presentation. We're all going on a cruise, for spring break, on Grandma's big ship. Delighted exclamations followed this announcement as Ryan distributed envelopes to each family member, containing confirmation of the family suite I'd arranged on Oceanic's newest vessel during its maiden Mediterranean voyage. Not just any cruise, Rachel added, raising her glass again. The inaugural sailing of our newest flagship with menu concepts designed by your very own Helen, a family vacation and a professional triumph combined. As dessert concluded and guests began to shift toward coffee and digestives in the living room, I remained briefly at the table, taking in the scene. Empty plates that had been filled with food shared in genuine communion, wine glasses with lingering drops of ruby liquid catching the candlelight, name cards where people had sat exactly where they belonged, their presence desired rather than commanded. Chloe paused beside me, resting a hand lightly on my shoulder. Quite different from last year. she said softly, echoing my thoughts. In every way that matters, I agreed. She hesitated, then added, I never properly thanked you. And no, for leaving that night, for forcing me to see myself clearly, even though it was painful. I didn't do it to hurt you, I said honestly. I did it because I couldn't continue as I was. I know that now. She squeezed my shoulder gently. Respect begins when you decide you deserve it. That's what you taught me. Taught all of us. As we joined the others in the living room, the conversation, and laughter continuing into the early hours of Christmas morning, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The cruise that had started as an escape had become instead a launching point. The empty table that had symbolized disrespect had been replaced by one overflowing with genuine connection. And I, Helen Montgomery, had finally found the balance I'd been seeking, not by sacrificing myself for family peace, nor by abandoning my family for professional fulfillment, but by claiming my right to both, by establishing boundaries that protected my dignity while preserving the relationships that mattered most. Later, as the last guests departed and Ryan and Chloe headed to bed, I found myself alone in the dining room again, gathering the last few glasses. Olivia appeared in her pajamas, supposedly en route to the bathroom, but clearly delaying bedtime. Grandma, she said, rubbing her eyes sleepily. Was this the best Christmas dinner ever? I knelt to her level, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. Yes, sweetheart, I think it was. Better than last year when you went on the boat and nobody had any food? She giggled at the memory, too young to fully understand the complexities behind that night. Much better, I assured her. But you know what? Sometimes we need to experience the empty table before we can truly appreciate the full one. She nodded solemnly, as if this made perfect sense to her 6-year-old wisdom. I'm glad you came back, Grandma. And I'm glad Mommy learned to be nice. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. As I tucked her back into bed, I thought about the year ahead, the cruise with my family, the potential promotion, the continuing evolution of our shared lives. Whatever choices awaited, I would make them from a position of strength and self-knowledge, no longer defined by others' expectations, but by my own sense of purpose. The Christmas that had once emptied a table had ultimately filled our lives, with respect, with understanding, and, most importantly, with the knowledge that true family bonds are strengthened, not weakened, when each member stands firmly in their own worth. I returned to the dining room one last time, extinguishing the candles that had burned low but steady throughout our celebration. In their gentle glow, I whispered the truth that had guided me through this transformative year. Your value doesn't disappear just because someone refuses to see it. Respect begins the moment you decide you deserve it. And as Christmas morning dawned on a house filled with genuine peace, I knew that the empty table of last year had led us, unexpectedly, but perfectly, to the most fulfilling feast of all. The nourishment of living authentically, loving honestly, and finally being seen for who we truly are.